Hey guys, Josh with LynkSpyder. Today we're going to talk about USB external batteries. I've got 4 Easyacc batteries here. These are the batteries that we use to power our fleet of GoPro cameras. I'm not trying to sell you on Easyacc. I can just tell you that these are the ones that we use. We're happy with them. We haven't had any failures. But I think what I want to point out is, for the most part, USB batteries are pretty common. They do about the same things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the batteries that we've got here, and I'm going to show you some of the features that I like, some of the features that maybe I don't like, and what situations it makes the most sense to use those. If you've seen any of our videos, you know that we do use external batteries to power our GoPros. They're great cameras. The batteries are very limited because they're not really designed for long recordings like we do in baseball and softball games. So these external batteries really allow us to get more life out of the cameras without having to worry about if the battery is going to go dead in the middle of a game. Okay, so the first one we're going to talk about is the 12,000 milliamp hour battery, and I think it's important to point out that Easyacc does a pretty good job of progressing over the years pretty quickly, and as a result, these 3 batteries are no longer available. But I think it's still important to point out some of the things that I do like about them. This was the first battery that they came out with that we used. It's the 12,000 milliamp hour battery. Really, there's nothing special about this battery over what you could get anywhere else. I still use it because it's 3 years old and it works great. In my opinion, when you go out to a tournament, you can never have too many batteries. If you're powering GoPros or if you're powering tablets and phones, it's always handy to have them. So this is kind of my backup go-to battery. With most of these externals, and certainly with Easyacc, there's a button that you'll need to turn the battery on. They'll have a certain amount of indicators. In this case, it's almost dead. I haven't charged this one in a while. Telling you where it is in the phase of the charge. They'll also have a certain number of USB ports, and in some cases they're going to be labeled with what kind of port there are. In this case, they're all 5 volt. All USB ports are 5 volt, but the amperage rates are going to differ. This one goes from 2.1 all the way down to half an amp. For GoPros, it's important to use the highest amp rated port. And the reason for that is the cameras are not going to pull more amps than what the battery will allow. And in this case, 2 amps, you're more than fine. What you don't want to do is plug a high battery use camera like a GoPro into the half milliamp port, because it's going to shut the battery pack down. And it's going to do it instantaneously. And in this particular case, with this one, I found that I could not even power 2 GoPros. I could do 1 GoPro in the 2.1 amp port, and then a cell phone maybe in one of the other ports, but that was about it. If you tried to do more than that, it would amp out. Now that doesn't hurt the battery. It's like a breaker. It's for protection, so it shuts down. But if you're using one of the battery eliminators where the external battery is your only power source, it'll shut your camera down, and if you're doing that in the middle of the game, obviously you're going to lose your recording. So that's kind of important to note. All right, so moving on to the second battery, and this one actually was one of our favorites for the longest time. This is a 16,000 milliamp hour battery. It's got 3 ports. It's got a 2.1, a 1 amp, and a 1.3. Again, not really useful for powering 2 GoPros, but certainly 16,000 milliamp hours is a lot of juice to get you through a whole weekend. But what I like the most about this battery is it was the first battery that we had that used a standard wall wart charger. Now what I mean by that is the other batteries, and in this case, uses a micro USB. Now in itself, that's not a big deal, but USB has to follow certain standards, and as a result, most of the charging cables have pretty low amp outputs. So while that would certainly charge this battery, it takes it a lot longer. Okay, so by not using a USB port to charge it and using a wall wart, they used a higher amperage port, and this battery would charge much faster. Now, if you don't run the batteries dead in a day, that's probably not a big deal. But if your battery goes dead, let's say you got 8 o'clock games the next day and you're done at 9, you don't want to have to worry if you wake up the next day and this battery's not charged. Using a wall wart, it charged a lot faster. I never had an issue the next morning. In fact, I think it'll charge in about 5 or 6 hours. It's good to go. Really like that. Now this third battery had some really nice features. But again, they went back to that micro USB port. I don't know why they did that. This is a 20,000 milliamp hour battery. With that micro USB port, if you started charging late at night, it was not going to be ready by the morning. Now, that's probably not a big deal. You're going to get quite a bit of charge out of it, and it's probably going to make you through the next day. But I want to know that my batteries are good to go. I like them to be fully charged. So that was a feature that I didn't really like that they went back to. But what I really liked that they did, in this particular battery pack, they added an LCD screen. And this LCD screen would tell you in a percentage what the battery life was, which was great. It shows you that at charge. It also shows you in discharge. But one of the other things they did was they've got an input and an output reading. So when you're discharging your battery plugged into a camera, it will say out. That's very, very important. If you walk by and you can't really see if the camera is running or not, if you see out, you know this battery is discharging, and as a result, your camera is running. Just key indicators like that are really handy, so you don't want to have to worry about whether the camera's recording or not during the game. That was really nice. Also, when it was charging, it would say in. Again, very nice. If you plug your battery into the wall, you want to know that it actually is charging so that you wake up the next morning and it's not dead. I really like that. Really good feature. The other thing, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't ever use, but you Sony guys out there, this battery pack actually was designed to work on the Sony action cameras. It has this DC out port, and with a special cable that came with this battery, it will power, I believe it's an 8-volt output, it'll power those. To my knowledge, this is the only battery pack that will do that. I'm sure there are others out there, but I've not used any. But very good battery. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, this battery pack is no longer available. Probably one of my favorite battery packs. It had a 1.3 amp output and a 2.1 amp output, and this thing would get me through the whole weekend. In fact, I would be driving on the way to a tournament. I plug my phone into it, run GPS, because we all use GPS when we're going to these new sites. I'd get to the location, I'd run my cameras all week long, and I'd charge my phone on the way home, and it never failed me in a weekend. It literally will run the whole weekend. It's a great battery pack. But as I mentioned, they stopped making that, and they moved to this power bank. Now, again, 20,000 milliamp hour, a great battery pack. I really like it. They lost the LCD screen. I don't know why they did that. They went back to these indicators, which is fine. You can see whether it's 25, 50, 75, or 100% full. They illuminate when they're discharging. They illuminate when they're charging, which is a nice thing. They also added this. It's kind of handy. It's a really bright LED light. So when you get down in a late tournament and you drop your keys on the ground, which seems like I do every time, really nice to have that. I've used it a lot more than what I thought. The other thing that I really liked, as I mentioned with all these cameras, each of the ports were marked at what amp they're rated at. These are what they call smart jacks. And what the smart jacks do is when you plug a device into it, it will recognize what it needs to be drawn and set it accordingly. And as a result, you don't have to worry about it. And again, I like that feature because I don't want to have to think when I go to plug my camera in. Say you get done on field 2, you've immediately got a game on field 3. You want to take your LynkSpyder off the fence, slap it over there. If you happen to have to change batteries or it got unplugged somehow, you don't want to have to be fooling around while they're warming up and make sure you got the right port. You just plug it in and go. The other thing is it automatically will detect that it's being drawn and it will turn the device on. Now, one thing that it will do that I haven't had any problems with, but I want to make you aware of is when it detects that whatever it's charging is fully charged, it will shut the battery pack down. Now, I suspect, certainly with a GoPro, if that happens, when the battery in the GoPro starts to dip down, I think it will immediately turn back on and start charging again. But that's something I'm really going to watch. I've only had this for about a month, maybe 2 months. Again, haven't had any problems with it, but that's something to watch. Now, the last thing they did, and I think this is just brilliant, I very much like this. They went back to the micro USB ports, but they did 2 of them. Now, the reason why they did that is, as I mentioned with these other ones that use the micro USB port, you got to be real careful because you may not charge it in the middle of the night. But since they've done 2, you can charge this in tandem. Now, that's the best of both worlds. If you have 2 amp charging ports, you can 4 amp charge this thing in a few hours. Very, very handy to make sure that you get it charged. But what I like the most about it is I don't really like a dedicated charger because I lose things, all right? So this guy right here that has the wall wart, I have lost that thing so many times that when I go to charge it the night before a tournament and I can't find it, then I have to put this thing away and I can't use it because I can't charge it. Micro USB, very, very common. If you lose one of them, you can charge with one. That's no big deal. But charging with two, man, that has worked out really, really well. Really like these packs. Again, 12,000 milliamp hour, 16,000 milliamp hour. These guys are 20,000 milliamp hours. Really, really good batteries. Now, Easyacc. I like them. I really don't have a relation with them other than I just use their stuff. I don't get anything off of them. So I'm not trying to sell you on this. But look for other devices that have the same milliamp hour rating that I'm talking about. I honestly wouldn't go to a tournament without 20,000 milliamp hour. It's perhaps excess, but I'd rather have too much. We've got tablets, we've got cell phones, we've got GoPros, we've got all of these things that draw power. And chances are you're going to go to a field that doesn't have any ability to plug in. And we can't live without our devices. We got to have those things. So I really like those. I'm not going to name any other brands only because I've not used them, so I can't recommend them. But again, they all follow a USB standard, so they're probably all going to be about the same. But if they're not the Easyaccs and you do something, look for the milliamp hour rating and look for the amperage output. I would not buy one that does not have at least a 2 amp output. Very, very important. So that's the USB battery packs. These are our backbone for the weekend, right guys? So we got to make sure that we get the right thing. I really like the Easyacc. Use whatever you want. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at josh@LynkSpyder.com and check us out on our website at www.LynkSpyder.com. Thanks a lot.